Welcome to Beauties and Beasties, the independent pest podcast for the UK. Hello. Couple of things. One, I'm wearing glasses tonight because you can probably tell by my face. I do a little bit of boxing, and tonight I had a couple of rounds of sparring with a good friend of mine who is 24, far fitter, far faster, far more accurate and better than me. And yeah, the repercussions. I don't mind. He's a good lad. He's boxing on a week tomorrow, so I hope and wish him all the best. That should be pretty good if we can get him away with that. What you don't see is Alex trying to coax his dad into how to use StreamYard. It's brilliant. I've never seen Alex under stress until tonight before we came on. He is panicking like hell. It's brilliant. In fact, it's the best thing I've ever seen. Catch up for the week. One, Layla Bennett last week. Incredibly well received podcast. Harry Hills. Well, someone said it was like one of the Cray twins, but after my performance tonight, it was definitely Harry Hill, for certain. But yeah, Layla Bennett's podcast, incredibly well received, very well spoken, very attractive young lady. But with a real interesting story. If anyone hasn't listened to that, go back. It was great to see. She comes across as quite a well-spoken young lady, doesn't she? And it's very easy to jump to conclusions of what someone's life has been like up to that point. But to find out she lived in a caravan with no water and no electricity for 8 years is and has built up now £1 million business is a fantastic achievement by anyone's standards. What else has happened? Well, if anyone has been on the forums this week, you'll see that I put a post on. We are trying our hardest to get a new CPD scheme for pest controllers. Now, I need to clarify this. We do not have it. It has not been authorised, or it has not been approved, I should say. I think we've ticked all the boxes. Looks like you've got TVs in your eyes. Should I take them off, or do I just look rough? I always worry that I look like the thug, and when you've got leather marks all over your face, it's not good, is it? I think I'll put them back on, to be fair. Let's see. TV's in the eyes. Oh, fucking hell, I look rough, don't I? We'll put a post on about a potential scheme. It hasn't been approved. I'm praying to God that that it does get approved. Just quickly, I haven't been through this with Al yet, but it'll be based on our software system. It'll be a standalone system based on our software system where you can go on and log your own points, and hopefully people will be able to verify the work that you've done. You'll be able to self-verify, etc. I'm not going to bore you with it because we all know what CPD is. We might not like it. In fact, a lot of people I think it's quite a polar thing to think, I love CPD, but there's a lot of people who hate it, and I understand why. I think it's a mind shift that you need, that you are doing it for yourself. You're not doing it for the industry. You're doing it for yourself. And the vast majority of people who hate it, Jason Stockham, I'm going to pick on you because you mentioned it. You said, and we need any of it. Why? I don't think we do. But I think what actually happens, Jason, is you will absolutely get your 20 points every year. You probably just don't realize it. So all the learning that you do goes towards it, and hopefully our system will allow you to see that you are doing it, and more importantly will allow your customers to see that you are doing it, so that they have more hope, trust and faith in you.
I was about to say, that CPD is, I think a lot of people have a problem with CPD because they can't see the financial value in it.
Yeah.
It's a, you take a day out of your time, or you take a day out of one of your technicians' time. It's a day. It's on a course that you may not sort of like feel, I already know all about that. I've been doing this for 20 years. What can you tell me about rats I don't know for 20 years? And how can I turn that, paying for that course for a day, taking that day off the tools, and usually because there is no centralized CPD provider, you either have to travel to the north or the south or the east or west. The course that you want to sit never seems to be within a 15-minute drive of your house. So that's 3 hits. And then how do you then turn that into money? How do you then turn that into value? And I think we need to have a bit of a shift, which is, I really wanted to see our CPD cards. I want to see our, all of our different CPD schemes actually on your card, presenting not just your year's worth of CPD, but where they sit. So let's say you've done a year learning about bird netting. Your card reflects that. It says, hey, I've learned so much about bird netting. I continue to learn about bird netting. So when you go for a job, when your client puts this up for tender and they say, hey, I've got 3 people at the moment going for this, which one is the best? Instead of going, right, well, I'm the cheapest, because that's just a hide to nowhere, you can say, look, for the last 2 years, I have shown a consistent commitment to learning about bird netting, to keeping up to date, to making sure that I'm not just compliant, but I am the best I can be. And whether or not that's formalized going to courses or presenting a portfolio of your work that's been vetted by a third party, it means that actually, when the guy next to you, who actually does nothing but insects and cockroaches, says, I can do bird netting because they just want the job because it's, easy money, you can actually stand out. Suddenly there's value in that, and it'll help you get jobs. And that's just my opinion. I actually think that's where we should be going with CPD. We should be making it add value to your business at the end of the day, and not just be a drain on it. Because to get your 20 points a year, even if we look at this, there's an easy way of getting 20 points a year without ever having to pay a penny. But if you want to do it through courses, £100 a course, £100 worth of travel, wages, let's just call it £250 before you calculate the days lost work, to get 8 to 10 points. And you have to do that 2.5, 3 times a year. No wonder everyone leaves it to December to get it all. So yeah, let's have a look at how we do CPD. And there's room for several schemes, and not to throw basis under the bus, but I think a lot of us have had very bad experiences with them recently, with not keeping points in tow. And there are some good schemes, and there's actually more than just our current 2 schemes. A lot of the big service companies hold their own internal schemes, so it's not an unusual phenomenon at the end of the day. Anyway,
Just
now
quickly, I can probably answer this one. Just quick before we move on. I'll question the panel: who give the authority to crew to say who's approved to provide the schemes? Basically, the long and short of it, what happened was rodenticides were turning up in birds of prey. So the HSE said to the chemical manufacturers, get your house in order before we get ours in order, before we get it in order for you. The chemical manufacturers put a crew together to try and reduce the amount of rodenticides. And one of the things that they have put in is that in order to buy their products, you have to show that you were either done the training every 5 years or are a member of one of the associations and commit to doing CPD every year. So that's what it is. It's not a government authorized thing. It's the chemical manufacturers who pay for crew or put crew together, who say this is what you have to do in order to buy our products. It's their pre-qualifying processes to make sure, hopefully, that only the right people get their hands on it. But anyways, let's move on, because Alex has got a very important guest for us to introduce tonight.
Absolutely do. Some of you may recognize him. Some of you may know him. They have him back. Sorry, just to cover that, Rupert. Yeah, I agree. You can have a long list of qualifications on paper. You can be very academic, but you've got to flip that on its head, which is, yeah, it does look good, doesn't it? Like you've hit the nail on the head. It does look good. And that's how you can distinguish others. If someone who is terrible can distinguish themselves from the pack by doing this, then just think what you can do being good and also having that long list of qualifications after your name. You'd run away with it. So I don't think what you're saying, I believe it's a bit of a poke, but actually I think you've hit the nail on the head in a very roundabout way. Anyway, back to our guest, who I am filibustering now, because this is going to be exciting for me today. And I use the word exciting in a very roundabout way because I feel like I'm going to get absolutely flogged tonight, because the guest for tonight is none other than my father, Dr. Jonathan Wade. So without further ado, I'm just going to add him to the stage right now. Here he is.
Hi,
Hello.
guys.
Hey.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I think you're just trying to get an increase in your pocket money, Alex, aren't you?
Yeah,
Really?
It started early, hasn't it? It's already started. There we go. This is, I have no doubt this might be one of our most watched videos because we are just going to absolutely ruin me.
I don't think Joe or I would do that. Do you?
No. Just spent 40 years practicing, that's all.
Oh, yeah. Tell you what it is, though, before you go on, I want to say something. I watch a lot of podcasts. I think everybody is sort of heading that way. And I can't remember for the life of me, and please put it in the comments if you can, I can't remember a father coming on and guesting on someone's podcast. And it makes me think a lot about why they don't, but it also makes it become very obvious that you two have a great relationship. So thank you very much for coming on. And now you can just rinse them from now on. We've said the nice shit, so just give it to them.
No, everything people say about him is true, and I would agree with that. So no problem.
Okay. I was about to say, I'm just a very small clone of you, Father, here. So whatever you say about me is just a reflection on you here. So you just remember that.
But I can run away and hide, Alex, and you can't. So not a problem. Anyway, fire away.
There we go. Absolutely. Well, just by way of introduction, obviously, I know you quite well. Others do as well. But could you just, for the sake of the podcast, introduce yourself? Just who are you?
Well, there we go. Well, I'm Alex's dad. It was an accident of fate. I didn't really plan that, but what can you say? It turned out half all right on the night. But I've got two more boys just to make sure everything did turn out okay in the end. Yes, Joe Wade used to work in a lot of places: North Africa, the Middle East, ICI, Pelgar, and now enjoying a happy retirement. So, in a nutshell, that's me. Many, many years of pest control.
Go on then, start with the start then, before Alex was twinkling your eye.
Yes. Well, back then I was in Dubai and working for the government there as the government pest controller, head of pest control, I should say, in Dubai, which was not at all like you see it today. Now it's all chrome and glass and glitz. People sunbathing in personalized villas and so forth. It was a lot more culturally relaxed in those days. It was a good mixture between the local community and the expatriate community, and although drink was allowed, getting drunk wasn't allowed. But it was one of those places where, I'm afraid to say, in pest control there were no rules. It had only been inaugurated in the municipality, that's government management operation, a few years prior, and that was by the introduction of black polythene bags for waste collection, which was in fact the major step forward in pest control in 10 years there, because at the moment they still throw their rubbish outside in heaps, and little men come around and pick it up and take it away, and it's a perfect breeding ground for flies and rats and so on and so forth, which was the major problem. Also the fact that a lot of the imported labour lived in barrack type accommodation or in mega flats, apartment blocks with hundreds and hundreds of apartments in. So German cockroaches and American cockroaches were legion. They were just everywhere. I mean, they were crawling over people as they answered the door, and you'd say, "Cockroach problem?" No cockroach problem here, as it dropped off the end of their nose onto the floor. So it was a very crude environment back in the day, and we had to get a good system in place, and it became very much a military organisation, you might call it. I gathered my staff into the general workforce, and then we went through, you might call a sergeant level, which were the team leaders, then inspectors, then officers, and then all the way up to me. So there was a direct chain of command established that went into different regions of the town. So that was Dubai. Spent nearly 8 years there. And we did get to the point where malaria was no longer transmitted. Unfortunately, it is now back to being transmitted, I believe, in Dubai. It all depends on one's approach. I had a very stormtrooper approach in Dubai. If you didn't comply, you got hammered, and we would turn your water off, turn electricity off, and take quite a few radical. Yes, if people didn't manage their septic tanks or whatever, then we would just turn off their power as an incentive to get a move on. And this did cause a certain problem, but I remember.
Good job it wasn't a hospital and all the ventilators went off.
Well, it's we weren't actually allowed to work in the hospitals, so they were under a separate sort of deal. A lot of government departments didn't want stormtroopers like me wandering in and going, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, because I'd have been there all day, quite frankly. They still, to my knowledge, manage themselves. I don't know who does the pest control in the hospitals, but we were not encouraged to do so. So we were basically dealing with black rats, brown rats, German cockroach, American cockroach, house flies, lesser house flies, with a major pest, common gamut of pests there. And then you widen it out to people keeping brown bears in the house, people keeping mamba that had their lips sewn shut, they thought. And of course, the infamous other...
Hang on, whoa, hang on. The what?
Yes, it was not an uncommon practice for people to go to the subcontinent and bring back, inverted commas, pets that they would keep in the house, not realizing that that pet, that small cuddly pet, would actually grow to 5 or 6 times its size and become unmanageable. So one house I went to, they had a mandrill, and it was a full-blown angry male drill. And it was all coloured up on the face and the bum, and it was not to put too fine a point, and it was pissed off with life. It was kept in a cage made of chain link. As it got stronger and stronger and started to shake this place to pieces, they just wrapped another layer of chain link around it till eventually you could hardly see the drill inside there. It was just shaking the whole thing off the floor.
The bit I missed was they got a mamba and sawed its lips.
Okay, well that was quite a common thing. People would bring back snakes, and they would be assured by the vendor in whichever town they'd bought it from that it was perfectly safe, perfectly harmless. You could kiss it; it wouldn't cause you any problems, and they would demonstrate it by a nice kiss on the nose. But the next thing would be that the twine that they used to sew the mouth shut with, its tongue would still function, so it'd still actually flicker its tongue in and out. But in fact, it couldn't open its mouth, and so inevitably they would die. But on occasion, they would rub their noses to the point where the twine would actually split and separate, and then they could bite. So we got an occasional call in to say that I've got a snake and it's just struck at my daughter. I'm a bit worried because she's got a cut on her cheek, and so on and so forth. And you'd rock up there and find, yes, it was a black mamba. So some, and quite often it would just be in an Alibaba pot, woven of hemp. We'd just have to kill them. Simple as that. There was no debate about return to the wild, as so many of these television programs promote. No, these were terminally removed.
As one of our previous guests would say, it was sent back to Jesus.
Yes. And there were in fact a lot of things like that, because it was a very ignorant community at the time who didn't understand the consequences of their actions. I mean, another guy, a brown bear, cuddly little things, aren't they? Little brown bears. When they get to be 5 feet tall, they're not. And when you leave it alone with your mother in the flat, she gets scared shitless, quite frankly, and she'll ring up pest control because the zoos wouldn't take it, the veterinary department wouldn't deal with it, and what was left was pest control. We were the inevitable catch-all for stupid, bad, ignorant, stupid things. I can't use the right words.
How do you deal with a bear in a house?
The bear was actually reboxed, and it was exported, re-exported.
So
we didn't kill that.
That one didn't go and see Jesus.
That one didn't go and see Jesus. I mean, nobody wanted to handle it because it was, as many animals in captivity, they get sort of stressed and they get very grumpy when they get stressed. So the best thing to do is to put it into a sensible container and take it away, and the government would pay for its repatriation. They didn't send it to Rwanda, but they did send it back to wherever it came from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just have to say, I think we are all very lucky in the UK.
I see Sean thinks that's...
I love the humour. We didn't send it back to Rwanda. That is right up my street. Anything that's totally inappropriate, I love it. Like it proper makes my day that we've got people who will still crack jokes like that, because I do, and people look down and notice that you've done that. I think that's great.
That's what I was saying. Lucky that we only have to, well, we don't have to deal with anything like this. But I'm going to sort of like take it back, because this is not actually where your story properly started, really, was it? Because your story started before Dubai. You were a doctorate of tropical medicine and entomology at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, weren't you?
That's true, yes. And I did quite a few years there working on mosquito genetics in an attempt to make mosquitoes incapable of transmitting filariasis, which your listeners may or may not be aware. Filariasis is it's a nematode worm, like a hare, very, very tiny adult worm. They're just like a hare, and they live in profusion in your body. You can get thousands of these adult worms lingering within your body, but the damage is caused by their larvae, and their larvae, called microfilaria, are tiny, 10 times bigger than a red blood cell. And these have a periodic ability to surge to the periphery of your body at one time of day and retreat to your body core at another time of day. And they do this to be in synchrony with the biting mosquitoes that transmit them to their next host. So if that mosquito comes out at between 10 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning, then that particular filaria, which would be called periodic because it operates on a periodicity, would come to the surface of the skin between 10 and 6, get sucked up by the mosquito, and within a period of time, several days, it would then further develop in the mosquito, and it will be transmitted to the next victim by a bite. So as in many of these vector-borne diseases, it takes 2 bites to do the damage. It's not just the 1 bite that does the damage. So I did a lot of work on that, because filariasis in itself, a very unpleasant disease. It blocks up the lymph nodes because there are so many of these blood parasites that it's like putting shredded cotton wool into your blood system. It blocks up the lymphatic system, and so your limbs cannot operate a return system on the lymphatic fluid, and so it builds up, and you get legs, arms, other bodily parts that swell to 8 or 9 times their normal size. And so
lymphangitis.
It's generally, yes, it's filariasis is a collective disease. There are several parasites that cause it and have different responses and different effects. But at the end of the day, it means you can't work and therefore become a burden on your community. If enough people are like this, then the whole community falls apart because there are not enough people doing the work and too many people who...
So, Joe,
Sean, you look disgusting, he says.
No, I don't. That's me thinking face. I was a farrier before I was a pest controller. And horses, because horses are so large and their heart is at the front, they often suffer with lymphangitis, which turns into cellulitis in the back legs. So when people say 8 and 9 times, it's incomprehensible until you see it. We used to get it that bad that the lymph fluid, this interstitial fluid, Joe, like that, because I know the big words, would literally ooze out through the horse's skins in its back legs.
God.
If you ever see a horse in the skin on its back legs, especially large horses, it has an almost rippled effect to it. That's what it'll have had at some point. But as Joe will tell you, it's horrific to see, isn't it? Horrific and so painful.
I'm not sure. I mean, I've not had that particular disease, so I'm not sure what the pain factor is. But the filarial parasites, by and large, all cause debilitation rather than death. Eventually, you may die, but if you get onchocerciasis, another filarial parasite transmitted by black flies, then it makes you go blind. And then again, a lot of blind people in a village means that more people have got to work to sustain them. And so the whole village will go technically anorexic. It can't feed itself and it dies out. So these tiny little flies transmit, I mean, black flies, simulids, they're very common in Scotland. And when people talk about midges and no-see-ums and whatever else they want to call these things, these are culicoides midges. And there are other simulids that transmit these diseases, not in Scotland, fortunately, otherwise everyone would be dead. But it is rumoured that, for example, the culicoides fly, so one thing, you go out in a park at night time where dogs have been crapping in the grass and so on, and you start to scratch your head. These are these tiny flies that have actually gone into your, biting on your scalp, and it's dark, you don't see them, or it's gloomy. But these are one of the main reasons why humanity has never spread further north than a certain point. Not because it's cold, not because there's no food there, but because even the reindeer get so badly depredated and eaten by these flies that they actually die of exsanguination. And that is the same thing with human beings. If you get more than...
Just for all the thickos, I don't know what that means. In what?
Oh, you die of blood loss.
Oh,
exsanguinate, sanguine being blood, X being the lack of.
It's just the way just the way it is that one bite an hour is considered to be an irritation with culicoides. They leave a nasty little bubble on your skin that you scratch, it becomes infected, and then the bite may last 2 to 3 weeks. If you get 20 bites an hour, then that's really a time to run, to get hell out of Dodge. If you get 200 bites an hour, then you're really going to be suffering medically. They might take a tiny amount of blood, but they'll send you insane. So, little things.
So I just have to say something to everyone listening to this and everyone listening back. Whilst you all growing up may have shared car journeys with your father, and on the way into school, as they were driving you into either primary or secondary school or wherever it was, and you talk about the football or you talk about the weather. No, our conversations were very much along the lines of, so let me tell you about mycophonaria, the heartworm, and all of the terrible diseases it covers. Let me tell you about the time that I once found a tribe full of people living in the desert, living in caves.
This is brilliant. You know, they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. The first time Ellis, who works for us at Dale, met Alex. He was doing an MPT on the road, Dale Pier. So they took half of us in one room and half of us in another room, and I'd said to Alice, that's Alex from the podcast, and all that sort of jazz. And he's like, all right. So he come out and said, what do you think, Alex? And he went, fucking trying to tell us I know Latin. What? I was like, what? He went, don't know what world he lives in. I come from Hartlepool. We don't speak Latin in Hartlepool, and just disappeared. I was like, what?
No, I am going to double... I'm going to double down on this. We all speak more Latin than we realise. It's a huge part of every word that we say.
You speak more Latin than anybody else, because we don't use Latin in Hartlepool and Newcastle. We don't use it.
What do you watch? What do you watch the snooker on, mate?
TV.
Yeah. What does that? What you watch it on a television? That's
We're all
Latin.
wondering where this is going, Alex. Where's this going?
Oh yeah, no, it's in the, I'm pretty confident it's in the English Collins Dictionary television. So I'm going to stick with that. We're perfectly thingy, but yeah, that one doesn't
Television.
fall
Tele
far from the
meaning
truth.
far, vision. Oh, I despair absolutely. But there we go. So yeah, you were in Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. You did that. You actually spent a bit of time in the London School as well, didn't you?
Yes,
Briefly.
yes. I was sent down, well, invited down there to stir the shit, you might say, because my boss at Liverpool went to London. And there's a horrendous rivalry between the Liverpool and the London School. And people who transferred between the two were never particularly popular, I have to say. So there's Bill, my old boss, now passed on sadly, who invited me down to give the place a once-over with regard to insect management. And because that was one of my great enthusiasms, is the best and easiest way to grow pests to do certain work. And I found that at the London School, and I shall name no names, their culture techniques were appalling. They were dangerous. They were incomprehensibly ignorant a lot of the time. The people concerned and I had nearly stand-up fisticuffs from time to time because they were allowing mosquitoes to breed in water pits inside the building that actually were directly connected to the outside. So if you had several tropical mosquitoes growing inside the building because of careless lab management, they were also emerging out into the streets of London. Now, when you've got a cosmopolitan population who could be carrying God knows what disease, yes, it's a cold environment, I understand all that, but it's not always cold in London. And if you do get people who have got diseases X, Y, and Z, and they're bitten by mosquitoes A, B, C, which can vector them, then you have a potentially serious problem in play. And we all know what's happening nowadays. The temperature's going up with global warming, and there will be local transmission of tropical diseases in the south of England as time goes by. We're already getting veterinary parasites coming in from Europe because of the change in weather. There's no reason why we shouldn't get, human pathogens being transmitted in the southern part of the country as the temperature goes up.
So this is actually an interesting thing. We had, so not the last one, but the one before last, the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health had a pest forum there, and they did actually have a lady on who is part of the UK mosquito surveillance program. And with that, she was talking about how they've got surveillance. There's Aedes albopictus starting to crop up in certain places of the UK. There's Anopheles steveni in the southeast of the UK, in some of the swampier, warmer regions around there. And the thing is we do have a lot of these vector animals. But we don't have it, luckily, mercifully at the moment, we don't actually.
You know what it is? I heard that joke of my love before you said it, and I was thinking, I'm not cracking it, I'm not cracking it. Well done, Billy.
Okay. But basically, we have the vectors, we don't have the diseases. And I asked the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, right, what is your plan? What is your plan for when we eventually, because it's only a matter of time, it's only one plane journey, it's only someone who went somewhere that they probably shouldn't have done on their travels, and we're going to have a real problem because, and I'm going to ask, Joe, how, when you were out in North Africa, Middle East, what was the most common way of, vector management of mosquitoes? What was the program that you guys used to install? Because I bet you a penny to a pound, that's not how we'll be able to do it over here, but it's the most common way.
You're quite right. I mean, in the Middle East and in North Africa, where I worked for 2 years, it was space treatment. I mean, trying to larvicide the breeding sites, you're on a hiding to nothing, because if it's Culex, which are not major vectors of anything around here, but yes, they're open, dirty water, septic tanks, stagnant ponds, blah, blah. You can treat those with, from the basis of raw diesel oil, which we used to use back in the day, to more sophisticated larvicides like abate, temifos, and so forth. But that's Culex. If you start to look for Anopheles, they can breed in water remaining in a footprint from a cow or from a tire track or whatever. So you're talking about trillions, potentially trillions of individual breeding sites for anopheles. Even water running over a stone, dribbling from a building and making a sort of little mossy trail down to the ground. They'll breed in that, and they'll sustain themselves on small vegetable growth, algae and so on and so forth in that water stream. Aedes can breed in anything. I mean, there's different species will breed in large areas of water. They'll breed in salty water. They'll breed in water tanks on roofs. They'll breed inside car tires, evidenced by that Asian tiger. I mean, that was carried to America, you might say, in car tires, in the water remaining inside flat car tires stacked on by the thousands on a boat. That's how it moved across the globe. But to treat them, the simplest and easiest and most efficient way was to use space treatment, which basically meant either thermal fog of highly visual diesel smoke carrying insecticides at a low percentage concentration, or ultra low volume application, which was, as it says, a very small amount of chemical at high concentration that's drifted through the air at a certain time of day, depending on the pest, and it ablates them. I mean, for a kilometre distance from your application machine, you can kill mosquitoes. So if that point source is moving, you can have a drifting cloud of pesticides that will kill all adult mosquitoes and houseflies and anything else for that matter within that span of insecticidal drift. And it's quite a technical business, whereas nowadays they just turn the machine on, drive around and think that's the business. Well, no, it's all to do with wind speed, it's all to do with temperature inversions, it's all to do with so on and so forth to try and get the best out of the products to do the job. But done properly, space treatment is a winner because you've only got to break the pest life cycle insofar as if you can apply the product 3 to 4 times in a row, daily, nightly, then you will interrupt the normal life cycle of that pest, and it gives you sort of 10 days bonus after that before they can get themselves together to mate, to lay eggs, take blood meals and so forth. So it's a good thing, space treatment, but nowadays they won't use it because by space treatment outside the park out here, you'll kill everything, and of course that's environmentally not acceptable.
Is the tiger one you mentioned, is that the one that is in the base of France moving up the country?
It probably is, Sean, and it's also in America. It's become just completely established across the state, all the southern states, and it's a terrific vector. I mean, it is capable of transmitting a lot of viral diseases, and it's once they're in, it's very difficult to control them. It can't go back to 0.0. I mean, something like the Asian hornet, just to take a different tack, it's big. It has a nest of a certain configuration. They don't breed so quickly. And so if you find one, you can actually track it back because it's going to be a worker female. You can track it back to its nest, find the queen and kill it. Can't do that with mosquitoes. You can't do that with cockroaches. Imagine you could actually say, found a cockroach in flat B, floor 2, and we can trace it back to source. No, you can't. They're all just there in their gazillions. So some things are possible to control, some things are not possible to control. And there's a very famous entomologist, one of my colleagues in Liverpool, who many years ago, but gave a presentation in Italy about 20 years of pest control of that's municipal pest control, not PCO type pest control, but government pest control. Are we any further forward in 20 years? And his answer was no. He reviewed all the particular pest problems, how they'd got worse over 20 years and trillions of dollars of input. So government malaria.
So here's a question for you two, especially if you've done municipal pest control. Why have we not moved on? I was talking to Davy Brown, who did a brilliant podcast for us. For anyone who hasn't watched that, go back, watch it. But I was talking to him, and he has told me about a book. I've just ordered it, actually. Ike Williams, I think it is. It's like 25 years as a rat catcher in the UK. And this was written a long, long time ago. And he says, if you have a rat problem within your house, it is probably the drains. And what they used to do was they would start in the loft with the ferrets and the terriers, and they would work distally down through the house, find the fault in the drain and fix the fault in the drain. And Davey said to me, why have we not moved on? So is pest control stands, especially municipal pest control, if you have that thing, you have that ability, why has that not moved then?
It depends which country you're in. I mean, some countries it has moved on, other countries it has not moved on. So if you take a country which is, say, an Islamic country, where access to the houses is not allowed, because they don't like, what should we say, the non-faithful to
outsiders.
Mix with the outsiders to mix with their family groups. You can't get in to do the work. It's as simple as that. So in other countries, even in the UK, you want to go into somebody's house and you haven't got the legal authority to enter, they can turn around and say, bugger off, mate. You're not coming in here. How dare you say I've got X, Y, and Z in my house and I'm making a problem for the neighbours. My sister had a massive rat problem up in the north of England in Staithes, and they were coming from her neighbour's chickens. Now, trying to get that issue sorted out, and it's a very common issue, was very, very difficult. Bad feelings, public prosecutions, floggings, ostracization, effigies, needles, pins, all this sort of stuff went on. People took sides. The village separates on who likes who and who doesn't like who. But why haven't we moved on? Because people are arseholes, is the bottom line on that one. And if they were all amenable and sensible and did what they should, then we wouldn't have any problems at all. But people are not. And so, trying to get enforcement in place is very, very difficult. And that's why nobody's moved on anywhere.
I'd also like to...
I got a second, because we're getting a 1:45. We've got to run out of time, and I want to hear some funny Alex stories. And I think everyone wants to hear some funny Alex stories.
I don't think just to quickly say, look, I've got a whole load of manuals that I'm going through. These are the World Health Organization manuals from 1986, the year after I was born. And the technical information in this, some of it is what we do today, and some of it, realistically speaking, is stuff that we've forgotten how to do. And at some point, we lost a lot of knowledge. It was either in a change in product formulation or change in product type that a lot of the techniques we just lost. I mean, if you have a look at using rodenticides, we talk about pulse, but we talk about Duboc and Mayer developing pulse baiting and saturation baiting and things like that. This day and age, do people actually understand the difference between the merits of them, when you should use which one and when you should use it? Probably not, but that is old technology. It's well proven technology. So why haven't we moved forwards in 25 years? Okay, society needs to pull its thumb out of its ass in many respects. You only have to look at New York and the fact they've only just bought in wheelie bins, because for the last 15 years they've been throwing waste on the floor and then wondering why they've got rats. But arguably we do have a little bit of culpability here as well, which is, again, CPD. Why do we not learn? Why do we not learn? Why do we not keep up to date with things? Why do we not learn some of the lost arts we've got?
It's not the pest controller that's the problem. It's the public that's the problem. If it wasn't for the public being bone idle and whatever, then you wouldn't have to have an educational program that went from us to the PCO to the public. People would understand this, intrinsically understand it. Because we're now no longer a small village where everybody knows everybody else. I mean, how many people know their neighbours? Very few people know their neighbours properly. They might know their name, but go more than one house away, you don't know bugger at the end of the day. Now, back in 50 years ago, when I was a lad, everybody knew everybody. And if somebody was causing a problem, the rest of the people would turn around and tell them so. And it would all get resolved, inverted commas, amicably or not, at a local level. Whereas nowadays, people do not interact. People don't know their neighbours. Do they even less want to turn around and say, hey, mate, you're chucking all that waste in your garden. You're making a problem for me, him, and everybody else around here. So it's just this isolation factor that's taken place, I think.
Do you know what? I can remember a saying that someone said to us not long ago, and it was something like, it takes a couple to have a child, but it takes a village to raise a child.
Yeah, very true.
And I think there's a lot of truth in that, isn't there?
There is.
Come on, tell us some funny Alex stories. You're not getting away with it. I'm not having you on. Yeah, come on.
Go on. I can't think of a funny Alex story. Not so funny. I mean, I do remember the times he used to disappear at night time on a regular basis in his black Matrix leather coat with a knapsack on his back.
With a what?
Swore blind he wasn't up to no good, but the bag always clinked. And yeah, when he was...
I was not committing crime.
Not committing crime. Alex was my troubled son. I must, out of the three, he was the most bloody-minded, stubborn, cantankerous of children. And nowadays, my mother would say, "Oh, it's good. It shows he's got some character." Alex,
Yeah.
you've shrunk. Where are you going down there?
Trying to hide.
But yeah, there's a funny Alex story in the sense that he used to disappear on a nightly basis, and nothing I could say or do would convince him of the errors of his ways. We had avoided the issue of hitting with a big stick, because that probably wouldn't have worked too well. Alex, of all my kids, is incredibly the most stubborn, cantankerous, and perverse. But undoubtedly, he's the most intense, smart, and clever guy I've ever known. I have to say, he's a very, very smart guy. Frightens me sometimes.
So how did you find working with them, and how did you balance that work from a parent's point of view? That
we used to fight
balance?
all the time. We used to fight all the time.
Over what?
The way to do things. I'd be saying, "Alex, do it like this, because I've spent 20 years and this is the opinion I've come to as to the best way to do it." But no, but. And I said, "Alex, just don't waste the time. Don't reinvent this wheel." "No, but I've got to." So nothing I could say would actually convince him that reinventing that wheel wasn't a good thing. And he did reinvent the wheel, and in some cases it was a good thing. But the price was time. So whereas reinventing that wheel took 6 months, when we could have got the work done in 10 minutes, it was difficult working with him, I have to say. But at the same time, it was very refreshing. So we used to have a great time working together, and I missed that as a father and a worker. I miss it very much. And I think I worked with Alex in the labs. I worked with my son number 2 in the manufacturing side at Pelgar, and that was great fun as well, because he had a lot to put into the business, the same as Alex has had a lot put into the business. And I'm afraid to say that his employers have never appreciated the true skill, knowledge, and ability of these two guys. They see them as cantankerous, awkward, shit-stirred little turds, and it's true, they are, because I bred them and I know what they're like. But they're all very good at their jobs, very, very good at their jobs, and that's the bottom line at the end of the day. What you want is efficiency, and they were efficient and still continue to be so, Alex, I guess.
A good pal says to me, "Your best dog is always on the verge of running in." I don't know if you know what that means or not.
No.
When you go shooting, your Labrador should sit by your side, you shoot something, and it should wait until you send it. Running in is where it can't help itself. It just sets off without you telling it. So your best dog is always on the verge of running in. It's a knife edge to spoiling itself.
Well,
I always used to...
Sad to say, I'm proud of my children. I mean, I know you shouldn't, it's a sin, but I am proud of them. They've all done well in their careers, and they've all done with due diligence and fairness. They've done the right thing in almost every instance, I think.
So go on, Joe's not getting off of this lightly. Tell us a story about Joe then, Alex.
Oh, can't imagine a story. Well, actually, no, probably one of my fun stories. Going back to the days when I used to sneak out to the woods to get roaringly drunk with my friends. That is what I was doing, Father, by the way, if you hadn't figured that out. I'm sure you had. Yeah. Okay. But one day, Dad pulls me to one side. In fact, I've got 2 stories. First story, he pulled me to one side and he's like, "Alex." And so where most of my friends growing up used to get drunk on, Snake Bite and Black, or just cans of Stella that they'd swiped, Dad used to, because he traveled a lot, used to bring back very nice vodka before the times of internet buying, before the times of Deliveroo. He used to bring back very nice vodka from when he used to go out to Czech or Poland or Eastern Europe. And I had this excellent little boot flask that sat in my Matrix style boots, and I'd fill this thing up. And I'd fill it up. And of course, it was only about 50 centiliters. But when you're sort of like 16, 17, that's enough to get you roaring on triple distilled vodka. And one day, Dad pulls to me one side and he says, "Hey, you're drinking more vodka than I am." And I was like, "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." I was like, "No, you can't possibly tell. How would you know that?" And he turns around and he gets out this little UV pen and he'd been marking off on the side of the bottle every time he'd had a drink. And then every time he went to go and get a drink, he'd get the UV pen out and he'd mark it off again. So you could see down the side of the bottle on the label all of these little lines. And he was just like, this is where I'm drinking and this is where you're drinking. And I was like, wow. I got fucked up there.
Science, you see, Alex. I have to say, Sean, there's one thing that Alex didn't properly admit to, is the fact that his Matrix boots, we bought in Whitby. I bought them for him. And Whitby, we went to the Goth Festival, because Whitby being the home of Dracula, Alex saw these boots and just wouldn't leave until he'd got these boots. And they were great big jack boots up to his calf with flaming red, flames being sewn onto them, and a big red toe cap and so on and so forth. And he used to strut around looking, I don't know, like something that's hell reborn or something, but he used to wear those big black coat.
I also used to point out that I had a shaved head and a face full of piercings as well. I was a proper little goth in my college days.
You got any photos of him looking like that?
I've got one photo. I've got one photo crop-headed.
Alex, stop. Let your dad talk. Have you got any photos of him looking like that, Joe?
Just one of them with his head shaved down to a grade 1. And he does look like a bit of he looks like some out of Wallace and Gromit, actually, I've got to say. He's sitting there. But yes, it's
right.
Here
we go. Let me tell the second. No, Hugh, I'm not listening to you. Second favorite story is Dad once told me the story of Mad as a Hatter, and I'm going to repeat this story because it has to be told in the way that he told it. So he once turned around and said, story of Mad of a Hatter. Years and years ago, best skin to ever make top hats out of in the Victorian era was moleskin. Now, Alex, one of the best things about moleskin is it lays flat both ways, because when you're a mole in a tunnel, you can't turn around. So, of course, you need to be able to back up through your tunnel, which is fantastic for moles, but also terrible for top hats. So what the hatters used to do is they get the moleskin and they'd stitched into a hat, and then they would just sit there and rub mercury into it, and the vapors from the mercury would slowly send them all insane. Now, the point of this story is not that story. Dad then turned around to me and said, right, by my telling you this story in this fantastic and convoluted way, I have used up brain cells that you will never be able to use again. And because you've only got a finite number of brain cells in your head, by my telling you this stupid story, which you'll never forget, I have made you stupid. And from there, that has started a tranche. Every time we will find different anecdotes to try and tell the other one, to try and make the former as stupid as the latter. Although he, now admits that he believes he's going senile, so he's got the last laugh because he forgets half of everything I say anyway. So honestly, I think that's cheating.
I shall avoid the obvious comments like, why am I here? Who are you? Sometimes recognise you and sometimes don't. But yeah.
So go on then, before you go, because I need to know, the last thing I need to know is, tell us the story of Pelgar starting up and what happened and how it came about and how Al got involved. And Al, you tell us your take on it as well.
I spent, after working in Dubai, I was invited to join ICI as a regional technical manager, which I was happy to do because we'd had 2 kids by that time in the Middle East, wanted to bring everybody home. So I took the job at ICI, and down the track, the non-crop insecticide business became public health pest control. And we were a very successful little subgroup of the ag business. Our profits were huge compared to our expenditure because we had no overheads. So public health regularly showed massive profits. And this made us extremely unpopular with our agricultural bosses, who fought tooth and nail to break up the public health business. And because of the misbehaviour of 1 or 2 of the people within public health, and I mean serious misbehaviour, financial and other, the bosses found the excuse they needed to break up public health and to distribute it amidst the agricultural groups behind us. So I couldn't deal with that, thought that was a shit thing to do. We'd all worked our heart and soul to get this company, this part of the business, up and running. And so I decided to leave, and I went to my colleague and boss and said, I'm going. I'm not going to stay here and get emasculated by this company. I'm going to leave. And he said, close the door. And at that point, he said, I also, but it has to be done the right way. You leave now, I'll leave later. So I left then. No bonuses, no leaving things, no golden whatever. I just left, to the curses of the human resources department. They really were not happy with me at all. But he had a company already formed called Pelgar. And so I went to Pelgar to do a lot of the donkey work for the next 2 years. And he left ICI 2 years later. It was then Zeneca. And we worked very hard, tooth and nail, for several years to earn enough money to stay afloat and to pay our wages, quite frankly. And that was mostly getting regulatory approvals, getting things sorted out with government. We had the great fortune that my colleague had arranged a deal with Sumitomo Chemicals that we would act as their in-country agent. So everything that was sold for Sumitomo, we got the commission on, and that paid our wages for the first 2 years. Sumitomo didn't normally do things like that. And so the guy who arranged it on our behalf was eventually hand slapped and told to stop that deal. But by that time, we were stable. We had actually got enough business of our own with things like citral forte and a number of other chemicals that kept us going for the first few years. And then Alex joined us after school to help me out in the labs that we'd established. We moved premise once or twice during that time. Eventually I moved from Liphook, where we were just an office-based environment, to Alton, where we took over a warehouse and a second warehouse and another warehouse. And Pelgar grew and grew and grew. Took on a lot of staff, started a proper laboratory where we could do insect testing, pesticide testing on insects. And Alex headed that one up and did a great job and developed some really clever and innovative techniques that we could actually work on with our own pesticides to show how efficacious they were and so forth. So he earned his place within the company by doing all that efficacy work with some steerage from me, because I was working between manufacture, product development and the labs. Our business was split with the technical director, which was me, who did everything else but the finances. And the other part of the business was the finances that was all done by my partner. Eventually we fell out, I have to say. Well, I fell out, put it that to me more fairly, and decided to leave that company. And Alex stayed on at Pelgar for some time afterwards before he also wanted to leave.
I mean, that's a very and then eventually formed Wade Environmental and onwards and upwards. But I mean, that's a bit of a sort of like a very contracted story, because it was. I remember. Story. Yeah. I remember working down at down in Rake. So the first factory that Pelgar had, and factory inverted commas, wasn't it? It was a torpedo shed. Where they used to make the old Whitehead torpedoes in the Second World War. So a whole load of very long, corrugated, not semicircular, like semi-cylindrical bunkers almost, out in an industrial estate in the middle of nowhere, where our neighbours were one guy who used to fix up cars, and then a great big concrete foundry where they'd make all kinds of little statuettes, from gnomes to really grotesque shit down there. Yeah, always out in the car park, slowly curing and drying. But from that little torpedo shed in the middle of nowhere, Ben, Dad, I spent days, hours, months, Dad much more than I, but certainly Ben and I, evenings and weekends, making up rodenticide, making up wax blocks, making up all of these things. And for a long time, that was where it was. But then from there, as you say, we moved from the Peak Centre down to Alton. And that was I remember that was a big day, walking into that huge space for the first time. And it was just one warehouse to start with, wasn't it? 13, forever the home.
Yeah, forever number 13, my lucky number. I've always found that to be a fortuitous event. But as Alex said, when you see an empty warehouse, it looks like you'll never fill it. Like any computer hard drive or whatever, it fills up in the blink of an eye. And it wasn't long before next warehouse and the next warehouse, and each one just filled up instantly with one thing after another. So it just seemed to be a never-ending story of needing more space, need more space, need more space. But I mean, I've left Pelgar now for a long, long time. I've no idea where they are in life, because I actually, with a scalpel, drew a line across my brain at that point and said that was my before life. I've now gone left. I have nothing more to do with it, nothing more to do with the people. The last few months there were not happy months, I have to say. I have very fond memories of the place at the end of the day, but I've also got some very grim memories of the place. And I think life is like that, isn't it? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but it taught me a lot.
Almost sounds like marriage, that.
I beg
No,
pardon?
like feeling married. It almost sounds like you had a sort of marriage to it that ended in divorce. That's the way it sounds.
It's
like
exactly the way it was that way, Sean. It was exactly that way. Nothing went wrong until it went wrong. And when it went wrong, it went very badly wrong, in my opinion. And the difference is simple, that I was very much a people person, and I don't believe my colleague was. So whereas I would be looking at the welfare, the day-to-day attitudes and feelings of the people there to try and not only get the best out of them, but to also make it a family. Perhaps that was my mistake, trying to turn a business into an environment that people got on with each other, that people could trust each other, rather than just rocking up for work, clocking your card in, and going to machine number 12 and pressing the button all day. It was meant to be a place that there was some community where people did actually get on and did like each other as best as they could. Not everybody likes everybody, of course, but that was my main ethos of working there. I wanted to enjoy my time there, is the bottom line. And to enjoy my time there, I didn't want there to be friction, aggravations, fallings out, spite, malice, all the things that are normal in EastEnders and whatever you. But that wasn't a common view, I'm afraid to say. And eventually,
I won't lie to you, Joe. That's exactly the thought process that goes through my head now as we grow as a business. I try to balance the wanting everyone to be happy and everything to be great, but for the pounds, shillings, and pence to make sense. And there is a definite sort of tear in me, because you think if I don't get it right, then they don't have the mortgage paid. But in the same price, at the same time, if I don't get it right, then we won't retain good members of staff.
That's
and
right.
It's like that it is a very difficult line to tread. And I imagine if you've got two people in charge at other ends of the spectrum, it becomes even more difficult to manage.
Well, Gareth did a terrific job of managing our finances. Couldn't fault it. He was very, very clever at that. And without his skills, then we would never have got where we were eventually. But there is a price to pay for pounds, shillings, and pence. And when that price is, I don't want to sound Victorian about this, but you have to take into account the humanity of the people who work for you. And they are not just meat on the hoof or pond life, as I've heard the word used. They are people. They're people with problems. They're people with families. They're people with needs and wishes. And yes, you can still make money, in my opinion, and take account of those feelings as well. So, anyway.
So that leads us on to the next question, doesn't it? Did you treat Alex like the rest of the other staff, or did you expect more from your kids? Because
I think that's fairly clear. I expected more, very much more from my kids. Yeah. There was no mercy. There was no quarter given. If Alex screwed up, he got a regular bollocking. As with number 2 boy, he did some fairly stupid things and he got absolutely flayed. Because I do expect them to be mini-me's at the end of the day, and I do expect them to be, and fair enough. And I think they look back on it and have no, I mean, you can answer for yourself, Alex, there, whether that corrective approach was good or bad or indifferent. But I certainly expected them to do as I would have done, not to be arrogant and say I'm right all the time at all, but certainly there are levels and strictures that would apply to me that I would expect them to apply to them as well, especially family members.
Yeah, so I remember one car journey going back home. So I have to also say that when I talk about dad at work, I always refer to him I always called him Joe. It was never dad. Neither Ben nor I called dad at work. He was always Joe. There was always that fairly clear distinction. But one car journey home, and I don't know if this is an expression or just something you said, but it's stuck with me forever, which is you told both Ben and I that failure will be held up for all to see, whereas success will be heralded in private. And that was always the way. If we screwed up, then there was no hiding it. I remember Ben drove a forklift into a door once, which I think was the event you were talking about.
Yeah.
Meant that we had to sit in because we couldn't lock the place up. And very publicly, when the paychecks came in, Ben's paycheck got given to him in cash by hand. And then with the other hand out, Dad took the money back to get the door repaired, in front of the entire workforce. Ben paid to get that door put back on its hinges. And that was it. But if we did well, it was always on the way, Dad was never shy with praise, but it was always on the way home in the car or when we had a meal later on. It was not sort of like,
And how much did
look,
that mean
everyone,
to
at
you?
how good my son's done.
Truthfully, what did that mean to you? That, like, how did that affect you? Not affect you. The praise that you got when you got it, being in public, was it worth more or less? Because I imagine it's worth more.
Oh,
And I just stand here,
depending on
there wasn't a public environment for Alex because we worked in a lab with no other people.
Got
So for Alex to be seen and witnessed in the manufacturing site was a rarity. He wasn't down there very often. So there is a sort of slight caveat to that to offer praise, I wouldn't go around to the main office and say, hey guys, Alex has just saved us all a fortune. Give him a round of applause. Because he wasn't there most of the time. So.
But in my head, I'm picturing a situation where you're sitting in the car on the way home and you say to him, you fucking smashed that, son. And for me, I think I've got two little boys and I can imagine that made their day.
Yeah. It did. I'm going to speak on behalf of Ben as well. It did. It really, it was one of those things, and it meant that we didn't do things for the praise. It meant that we did things to do them right, not because we wanted to be seen, to be getting a pat on the back from the technical director.
Yeah, got it. It's like praise off your dad's worth more than praise off the technical director, isn't it?
Always.
Yeah.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So last question from me, because I've fucking loved doing this with you too. If you were head of the company and you've done all that, did you feel like you were living in your dad's shadow? And if so, how did you feel like you stepped out of it, or how did you see him step out of it, Joe?
Oh, Alex was always streets ahead of me intellectually. So I think what he did when he did it at Pelgar, he learnt a lot from me, there's no doubt. But then he went off on his own little star-like tangent and started doing his own stuff. And I think it was not difficult for me at all for Alex to go on and go up and do more things because I always knew he would. There was no conflict of interest. We weren't in competition for the same job or the same post. Alex wanted my job, and I would have liked Alex to have my job when I left. But I think, to be honest, my colleague had probably had enough of the Wades. We built that. There's no two ways about it. We built that business the Wade family did. We did the manufacturing. We did the product development. It was my son's friends who came in to do work at the factory in the early days. Without that support and those people and that diligent input, even for pocket money for those guys, we would not have developed a very successful, perhaps UK's biggest pest control manufacturing company now. And I think I'm very grateful for them for that. I walked away from the company after a deal with my colleague to walk out and never see him again, which is fine. And I've done my best to share a lot of that benefit with my kids towards their houses and so forth because they deserve it, quite frankly. They helped me do what I could do at the time. I not only had the benefit of people I could trust doing jobs that sometimes were quite difficult, I also had the opportunity to actually work with my kids. And that's something that many people don't get. And it really, really was important to me. And I still treasure those moments, I have to say. Worth more than money. There you go, Alex. That's a pat on the head. We can do that.
There we go. It's in public as well. Jesus.
Not the car on the way home either. Al.
This feels
So go on,
weird.
Al.
What's happening?
So you go on, Al. You tell us, how did you feel that you stepped out of the shadow and became your own person from the early days through to now?
At work, Dad was my mentor through and through. There was no shadow. I didn't see it as sort of like him overbearing, holding me back. It was always a mentorship. He taught me everything that I know about this industry, continues to teach me things about this industry that I have never considered, never thought. It's an ongoing thing. There was never a sense of just his presence looming over me, or me having to sort of fill his shoes or anything like that. He was a mentor, and despite the fact that we sit here and we joke and we said, I always used to say that we got on like a house on fire. Quite literally, it's like we're either getting on like a house fire, or somewhere there was a house fire. And it was. But it never, we had some days where we didn't speak to each other at all. And equally, we would sit there and we would sit outside, out the back of Bentley, out the back of Tarakan, with a coffee in hand and a cigar and a smoke. And we would sit and talk for hours about pest management around the world, about how these chemicals worked, how about the animals live and develop, and the thought processes behind it. Every day, I was just soaking up knowledge. There was never... In my mind, there was never this sort of like feeling.
But there is always a point where the apprentice becomes the master. And clearly, was it when Joe stepped away and that was it? Or was it before that, or what?
It didn't actually, Sean. It was I left because of some office issues, and I certainly wouldn't discuss here. But there were things afoot, and eventually I said, F this, I'm gone. I really can't do this anymore. I've got a life I need to lead. Now, at that point, Alex was left on his Jack Jones at Pelgar. He developed a team. He had people working with him. He had some smart new labs. Everything was going really hunky-dory. And then after a reorganization, Alex suddenly found he didn't have a team. He didn't have people to work with. He was a manager of nobody but himself. And his whole job changed from being fulfilling, rewarding. I remember Alex used to have his regular meetings with his team members, his staff, and he was hugely respected by them because he managed them with compassion and with skill. Now, when that was taken away from him, and he probably wouldn't tell you all this, it upset him massively that my colleague could see him as valueless. He wanted to keep him in the company because he wanted Alex, as a smart guy, to be there just in case, but he didn't give him the benefit of the doubt. He didn't give him the ability to develop as a person, and he didn't give him any credibility at all, in my view. And that's when Alex said, I'm going to. I'm out of here because I'm not being given any respect by this guy. I'm just being put in a corner, used as a little toy to bring out from time to time, give a lecture here, give a talk there. And Alex got fed up of that equally. And so that's when he decided to leave. So it wasn't a case of stepping out from under. It was more a case of I'd gone. A lot of, therefore, part of Alex's friendship group, me, had gone. And he was left with not a lot else, but a diminished role. Because Gareth wants to save money, save money, save money, save money. Now, Gareth, who's not here to defend himself, may argue that case. But now that Alex and meet from time to time, they get on far, far better than ever they did in those last months at Pelgar. Is that not true?
Yes. Yeah. It is. We didn't talk for a bit, but actually recently that we've reconnected on a more sort of like professional level. Yeah, Gareth and I get on a lot better than we ever did do. But I mean, back to the point.
Though, I'm guessing that that's a respect thing. That once you are gone, whatever the internal politics was, there is a respect on both sides or all sides that you might not say eye to eye, but there is an easy understanding, maybe or not. Have I got that wrong?
You've got that right, Sean. I think Gareth, in my opinion, has realised full well what he lost when Alex walked out the door, and he sees him now, and the way he has risen through the business and industry, and realises what a mistake he made. I think to let Alex go so easily and in such bad terms. I would say
this is all wild speculation, and as a caveat, I still do speak to and work with Gareth. So let's leave this one.
Listen, it's over to you, mate. Go on, finish it off. You say what you've got to say to your dad, because your dad said a lot about you.
What can I say about Dad?
now
Nothing.
Be careful now.
No, why we're going to say something nasty? I mean, I think probably one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen you do is feed an entire cage of Aedes mosquitoes by hand. When we used to feed them on defibrinated horse blood and a very cunning blood feeder that Dad milled out by hand. But occasionally the blood would turn up coagulated, or it would turn up already starting to turn, and mozzies need feeding at the end of the day. So he'd be like, put me on a coffee, I'm getting my book. And he'd take his book into the mosquito labs, and there'd be this foot by foot cube, and he'd put his book on the top of it, and he'd have one hand in the cage like this with 500 mosquitoes covering it, top, bottom, and sides, with the other hand sitting there sipping a coffee, turning the pages of his book as he sat there for half an hour. I never wanted to do that. I, on the other, I get bitten by a mosquito and I swell like someone's trying to hide a cricket ball underneath me. Dad, on the other hand, no, not a problem, not an issue. So there we go. There's a story for old time's sake.
Photographs to prove it.
Yeah, I've got a photograph of it somewhere. I used to love working in the labs with you. I used to be able to sort of would sit there. I've still got files and ideas of things that we wrote on napkins, and sort of ideas and schematics and designs, and I've got them all filed away, just sort of we're never going to use them. But the amount of innovation that we would come up with over a coffee, over a sort of cigar in the car park, was intense. Loved it.
The good old days. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there we go.
I have to add one thing. The thing, after all my years in tropical medicine, public health, pest control, the thing I've enjoyed the most, Sean, and this is not a gushing comment, is working with my children. And not many people get this privilege, and I think it's been something that's been of great reward to me, and still is. And I think it's I feel most favoured among men that I can have this thing, that we've never had friction, particularly that's lasted more than 10 minutes. And it's always been very positive. Yeah, back to the
This is going to be a problem for me going forwards now, because at every trade show, at every regional forum I speak at now, these will get brought up.
I'll find a photo. I'll send you
find a photo.
Find a photo. I've got to see a photo.
Find a photo. That's unnecessary. What was I about to say? You've completely torpedoed me, the pair of you. Absolutely. But okay, there we go. There we go. We've got some love coming in on the chat now. So awesome episode. Thank you very much.
Did you see what he's done with Alex though?
What?
Put that back up. That was very smart, Hugh. Put Hugh's comment back up. Did you notice?
I did, yes. So again, very quickly, we got last 2 minutes before we go into our last final tranche of questions. Explain why you always sign your name, Dad, as a capital J and a capital O, as opposed to a capital J and a little o, because there's a story behind that. Don't get the picture now, you absolute wally. I can see you going through your phone.
Yeah.
This is unnecessary. You son of a bitch! Don't you do it. Oh, there we go. Yeah, they're the boots I used to wear. That was another very fun to have a picture of me.
Oh no, I can do that. I've got it on my phone.
Oh, nice.
Yes, because my name is Jonathan Oliver, so my initials therefore being J-O, big J, big O. I used to sign my name J-O Wade, and so people call me Joe.
It's not a contraction of Jonathan. It is a what's the
or
right
Joseph,
term?
or Josephine. Yeah, no, just Joe.
Josephine. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, should we, before anyone else throws me underneath the bus, should we go to our last three questions before we finish for the evening then? Hang on, Sean, were you buying cowboy boots today?
Who would make up lies like that, Danielle Beatty? I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow. Okay. All this shade you've literally just thrown at me for wearing like biker boots when I was 17, and
Yeah.
you today at the age of what? You got a pair
Yeah.
of cowboy boots.
I've got a pair of
Okay.
cowboy boots.
Please, everyone who's giving me shit about my boots, please extend that courtesy to
I
Sean.
promise you, if I put a picture of my cowboy boots on to get out of it, I'll just put your boots right back next to it.
That's fine. Right. So with that, we have got our final three questions coming up then. So I'll ask the first one this time. Have you enjoyed your time on the podcast, Dad?
Oh, thoroughly. Yes, it's been very pleasant. It's just like a nice chat. It's very convivial. It doesn't seem like there are people earwigging us who are, sniggering behind my back and your back collective. It's been very nice. Enjoyed it.
and they will have done, and I will not hear any end of this whatsoever. So there we go.
So, Joe, you're going to have to give us a shameless plug of anything at all.
A shameless plug. Well, of course, as a director of Wade Environmental, it would have to be Wade Environmental. I think it's a company that started when Alex left Pelgar, and now has left it when he's joined BASF. But I'm still a director there, so yeah, shameless plug for Wade Environmental.
Yeah. I also have to point out, sorry, with Wade Environmental, this dynamic that Joe and I, Dad and I have, I enjoyed it so much that I made a pledge. I made a pledge that every year that Wade Environmental was running, I'm not sure we're going to do next year, but every year that Wade Environmental was running, we would pay for a son or a daughter or a father or a mother to basically do their full level 2 course to allow them to create a pest control team as a family. And for the 4 years that Wade Environment ran, we put 4 people. We created 4 teams, and it's great. We've 3 sons and father teams and 1 husband and wife team have done it all. So yes, and that's all off the back of just don't you son of a monkey. Yeah.
Under that hat, there is no hair.
Who's that? Fred Durst? Is that Fred Durst? Who is it?
That's Alex.
Is that the American singer from Blink-182 or something like that? Is that him?
No. Limp Bizkit, mate. And I would also hasten to add that was me and Dad stood in my dorm room on my first day of university. So I would have been a cool 18, 19 years old at that point. So I would like to think that I have only matured like a fine wine. But
yeah.
Great. There we go. That's me.
That's how he's matured.
Okay, let's just
go on. The last question, Joe. Who would you like to see on the podcast?
Well, briefly talked about this before. I think what I would like to see on the podcast is somebody from developing countries to show their journey and where they've got to. We're all familiar with the sort of American type style of pest control. And I'm becoming more and more familiar with the UK type of pest control, although I have to say it was nothing like it when I was a lad. When I was a boy, if you wanted something put on the label, you'd ring up HSC and say, hey guys, how are you doing today? Blah, blah, blah. How about putting X, Y, and Z on the label for me? And it would be done. So things have changed a lot. Nowadays, you've got to go through more hoops and things you can think of. And I think when you look at the overseas environment, they copy what happens in the UK. They try to copy what happens within the European theatre. If Bradifcombe gets bad things said about it, they'll all go into a complete jelly wobble out there because they don't understand the full stops and the commas within the paragraphs that are used, and so they they tend to gut react to everything. I think it'll be interesting to see how pest control is developing in, I won't use the word third world, but not in the first world, shall we say.
Second world.
Second world, yeah.
I don't suppose you know anybody who travels the country speaking of people in countries like that, do you?
No, is a simple answer to that. No, him. Nowadays, you would have a lot more experience of this nowadays. I mean, when I travel to my patch in ICI was the Near East, which was the Middle East and other associated countries, and also including South America. And within those countries, there are some very, very smart people, but they're held back by the system. They're held back by finances. They're held back by culture, and so on and so forth. And it's a case of, do they do as well as they could? Would it be better if they were more able to attend things like the various conventions we have in the UK, and not just for financial benefit? I mean, there's a lot of people come across here to strike deals for this, that, and the other. What would be nice is if people came across here to learn and to take this information back into their own environments, their own countries, and actually progress in the right sort of way. You know, CPD, perfect case and example. The people with their own pest control groups in those countries, how do they monitor the efficacy of the people who do the work, and so forth? It would be interesting to know.
I think that's a really good point to end on, actually, which is we take CPD for granted. We see it as a millstone sometimes. We see it as a bit of a something that we have to do. But if we didn't have it, if we didn't have that opportunity to learn and teach and train and continually develop, what happens? Where do you get that knowledge from? How do you make sure that you are good? Do we revert back to some of these regions which do struggle to find good knowledge, that do struggle to find good training? And if you can't find that training, and if you can't prove that you have it, then where do you end up? So there we go. Right.
Agreed.
I think that is us done for the evening now, isn't it? So I'm sure
Can I just say it's been a pleasure to be here, but I also feel very blessed that I got to share this with the pair of you. So thank you very much.
Sean, it's nice to meet you first time, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself today. I think I wish you good fortune going onwards and upwards, all of you.
God bless.
Yeah, cheers then. Bye.
See you folks. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Beauties and Beasties podcast.